perhaps there's no such thing, and it's a real challenge. But if we use a thing called a social model, and please ask me questions on that if I don't make that clearer. But if we use a thing called a social model, then perhaps there's not such thing as a person with a disability. There's just people. And it's about the barriers that people face and the environment they're in, rather than it's a person with a disability. It's a person facing a disabling situation. Something to think about. So I will do my best here to sort of discuss how we share the slides. And I'm going to take us through that as well. But Chandy, could you help me screen share for me?
Yep, just give me a second. I'll share the presentation.
Thank you. And what we're going to do is we'll talk you through this, but as Chantal has rightly said in a very nice way, and I think there was a lot to say. I want to get a sense of the room as well while we're just doing this. How many people here have come across the word intersectionality? And a real hats off to anyone who wants to just type what they think it might mean. Can I ask? It's totally okay if no one has, but can I ask, how many of you ever come across the term intersectionality? Would it be a new term for most of you? Please do use the chat or come off microphone if that's easier. Thanks, Keisha. So you've heard of it. Okay, that's great. Um, okay, that's good. I'd be interested to see how many people have and who haven't, but I'll do my best to explain it as well. The intersectionality is really about that all of us, we have different intersectional lives, that we are people of color at times, but we may be people of color with access to incomes and healthy incomes, or maybe we're people of color who are poorer. Maybe we are parents and we're people of color. We all have different intersectional identities in our lives. And in that way, we often find ourselves lost in trying to say, I am made up of many experiences rather than just one. And it was famously said that there is no such thing as an intersectional, so there's no such thing as a single issue life or a single issue, sorry, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives. This was said by Audre Lorde, and what I'm going to do is try to explain that a bit more. That sometimes a person may be disabled, and we think of them as that's their disability, or that's their life, or a person may be black, or a person may be gay, and a person may be trans, and all those things are part of their story, but not the whole of the story. But the difference is that these can create intersecting barriers to somebody, and that makes it very hard for us to build policies and understand things if we don't have people's realities telling us what world we live in. So this is where we come on to the power of lived experiences and why they matter. I wonder if, from speaking to Cole, and I know this from a global experience as well, I wonder how many times we talk about lived experiences and whether we see that as an asset or not. Can you all see the slides, by the way?
Yes, we are. Go ahead, Atif.
Brilliant, thank you. So, Chandy, would you just move for me? Thank you. Okay, so this is the power of lived experiences here, and Chandy's going to do her best to keep up with me, and I really want to thank her in advance for doing that. Our team is made up of disabled experiences. And my team itself, and I'm the CEO of it, 79% of my team would identify as disabled or neurodiverse. And in that reality, we have a high proportion in the UK of 27% of it is called the disability employment gap, where 27% of people with a disability are less likely. The disability employment gap is less likely, it's 27% to employ disabled and employ disabled people. For me, that's a real challenge, not just from my own life experience as a neurodiverse learner, but also somebody who says, well, that's wrong. We're missing out the assets of people's lives. That if you are less likely to have employment or in higher education because of a disability or because of neurodiversity, then we're missing something. We're not just missing the experience of that person telling us. We're also missing the experience of what is our civil society? What is a society where people are not being able to participate in healthy ways? So for DNA, and we win lots of awards around the world, and we got to do this work with Commonwealth for Learning. I've always argued that we as a team facing barriers are a team of experiences that are this good at what we do, not despite those disabilities, but because of them, through them. And this is really important to understand that we can be this good at what we do, not despite our differences, but because of them. For every £1 spent on diversity and abilities work, it generates just under £10 billion a year for the UK economy. And this is about tackling the disemployment gap and challenging things. And I'm raising this because, not because of what we do, but because this is very much, I think, the values of Cole to help, not just about literacy or education, but about healthy participation. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. And we're going to just play a little bit of a game after this. So if you can look at that image, it is about intersectional approaches. So authentic inclusion means recognizing how our social and political and economic characteristics interact with social barriers. Now, there's a history and a legacy. It could be patriarchy or racism and capitalism, class, ageism, homophobia, colonialism, and transphobia. They are wider structures that can affect how we show up in the world. They can affect how we feel safe in the world. And there are other aspects of an identity. It could be your gender, your religion, your education. So we're made up of all these experiences rather than just having one identity. But the challenge is that some identities feel more safe than others. And sometimes people hide some identities because they feel they have to, whilst others cannot hide an identity because it's visible. Could be being blind, could be being a wheelchair user, could be an impact of cerebral palsy. A lot of people may experience dyslexia or ADHD or autism who may mask and hide it a lot because they can hide it, but they may choose to hide it because they doesn't feel safe rather than feeling welcomed. So that's great. Cynthia, I'm going to answer that question. And please, I really like that you're using the chat there. What's the difference between disability and neurodiversity? Can these terms be used interchangeably? Brilliant. I really think that's a great question. So I'm just going to answer that. Disability is what we traditionally might see as a medical problem or a medical issue, that someone is disabled and it's their disability. With neurodiversity, you can have an example of, you say, well, it's your disability, it's your dyslexia, it's your ADHD, it's your autism. But what neurodiversity is doing is saying, really, we are encompassing a whole bunch of differences that make up our ideas and our values and the way we see the world. Now there's a movement to say, is it a disability? And for many people, they say, yes, it is. It feels like a disabling situation when I'm struggling to read and I don't feel I belong in the classroom. And other people are reading and the words are moving for me. This feels like a disabling situation. And for others, having a disability says this, that I don't feel I belong easily, or I'm seen as an invalid or a problem in our society. So those are things that can often be seen as a medical model, that there was a medical issue that makes that wrong. And the social model says, no, we all come in differences. We always will do. And where there are barriers, there is a collective responsibility for all of us to address those barriers. So really simply to answer the question is, what is the difference between disability and neurodiversity? Well, I think it depends on the situation. If you're feeling welcomed and protected, then there's not a difference at all. But if you're feeling that your neurodiversity has to be masked or hidden, or you're afraid to talk about it, then you find yourself in a disabling situation. It's much like a wheelchair user. If they're able to use spaces and they're welcomed and it's accessible, then there is no disability. But if they arrive to an office and the only way to get up the office is using stairs, then they're in a disabling situation. Rather than putting the emphasis on them, we're putting the emphasis on the situation and the barriers they're in. And this is the social model. I hope that helps, because it's going to be relevant as we go forward. So when we do the next slide, I'm going to really ask you to be courageous with me. And I know there's 70, 80 people here. So let's do our best here. I'm going to ask you some questions of who certain people might be. Now, you're really welcome to use the chat. If, Chantal, it works, we can even ask people to come off mute. And let's see how that works with 80 people.
That's fine.
I might just point to a couple of things and then I'll see if you can name them. So if I point to the lady right at the top, I'll be really impressed if folks, I'll be excited as well if people can name her. There's a black and white picture in the left-hand corner at the top. Would anyone know who that lady is?
Is it Sojourner Truth?
Sojourner
Truth?
Oh, very close. I can see why you thought that. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's not Sojourner Truth, no. But right, but I love to think that they knew each other. Sojourner Truth, who gave that famous speech, "Ain't I a Woman?" Anyone else guessing who that might be? Yeah, okay. Lokeya, thank you. Harriet Tubman, yeah, wonderful, brilliant. So Harriet Tubman, I'm really impressed. So Harriet Tubman had epilepsy. She was born a slave, sadly. She ended up with visions and epilepsy because she was hit over the head very hard by a slave owner with a shovel, and it caused her to have hemorrhages and some real challenges. But in her visions, she saw a role for herself to free slaves. She created the underground railway system to free slaves, to dig through tunnels. And she was incredible that she went across 600 times to free people from the north of America to the south, from the southern states to the northern states. And by doing so, each time she risked her life. She said it starts with a dream. And from that dream, Martin Luther King famously said, "I have a dream." He's referring to Harriet Tubman's visions and what she could see. I might just move forward to the lady who's dancing there. Anyone know who that might be? And it will be okay if you don't. Anyone guessing? Oh, wow. Blimey, this is amazing. This honestly, people don't usually get this. So, Jerusha, thank you. That's great. Jerusha, wow, I'm really impressed. Okay, so her name was Sudha Chandra. That's right. She was an incredible Indian dancer, but both her legs were injured in a car accident. It was terrible. But she created a whole new way of dancing through that, the way she danced, the way she moves. It's really worth looking at YouTube videos of her to see how she changed dance. And what does dance look like and how do we interpret it? And is it such a thing that a person facing disabling barriers or a disabled person can't use dance as an art form? In some ways, she became probably more famous in her dance and her art than she did before the accident. I'm going to point to the picture, the man in the glasses. Anyone know who that is? And I'm sure you're probably all fairly confident that that's Steve Jobs. Yeah. I wonder how many of you might know that Steve Jobs was a dyslexic thinker. He may have been autistic, but we know that he was dyslexic, but we also know that he was adopted. His parents were he's half Syrian. So he grew up in an experience, not in a wealthy family at all, but his adopted father was a motor mechanic. And I really find it amazing that he was a dyslexic learner who struggled to fit in, could see big pictures, and came from different backgrounds. That wasn't necessarily easy to feel welcome in. I want to point to the machine next to Steve Jobs, and there's a woman standing next to it. Anyone know what that machine is? LaCoy, thank you for saying Ada Lovelace. No, it's not actually not Ada Lovelace, but it's a good guess. Anyone else want to guess what that machine might be? You're very welcome to come off mute if that's easier, or type it. If I give you a clue around World War II, does that help at all? Okay, I'll say it for you. So this is the machine made by Alan Turing. And Alan Turing, has anyone heard of, have you all heard of Alan Turing? Has anyone heard of Alan Turing? There's a famous film I'd recommend watching it. It's called The Imitation Game. But Alan Turing changed the course of World War II. For the Allied nations, he built a machine which changed the course of World War II because it broke the Enigma machine. The Enigma machine was the machine that the Germans made, which was really difficult to interpret how their code worked. And this machine, which was named Christopher, it was named after the first person that Alan Turing loved. His first person he loved was a man called Christopher. And Alan Turing was gay, and he was autistic, and he was somebody that didn't fit in. He was someone that was quite different. He struggled to make friends. He was quite a loner. And yet he built a machine that changed the way World War II ended. It was incredible. We all owe a debt to Alan Turing and his differences. But Alan Turing himself didn't see it in his time. Sadly, he was chemically castrated and took his own life because it was illegal to be gay in the UK at that time. And he had a really hard time when he was exposed to that. So if I point to the picture on the corner on the left-hand side, anyone can guess, I'll give you a clue, it's Danish writing, but anyone know what that writing says and who may have written it or drawn it? Can you guess? Yeah, it says strike for climate. And that is the very same sign that was made by Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg changed, I think, for the Northern Hemisphere, climate urgency, changed the way young people who went on strikes for climate change to protect the climate all over the Northern world. It was incredible. And Greta Thunberg was someone who was autistic. She still is. She's someone who didn't fit in school, struggled to make friends. She even had an eating disorder, which her mother talks about. And yet, how does a young girl, and I'm asking you this question, how does a young girl who doesn't feel she fits in, struggles to cope with friendships, change the course of climate urgency? How does a young girl, one year, no one wants to sit with her at lunch, and the next year, the G8 leaders all around the world want to be in photos with her? Can I ask you, do you think Greta's autism went away? Did she just make it disappear? In truth, again, we can be this good through our differences, not despite them. But sometimes it's hard to tell those stories. Sometimes we kill shame when we tell those stories. But it is our role as practitioners, as leaders, as teachers, as trainers, to look for the places that people are in and go find them. Now, here's a role model for me. I'm a dyslexic guy who struggled at school. I really, really loved all the things that Schontal read, and I always amazed to hear those things back at me. But I'm someone who struggled to read at school. I've achieved some very big things through a lot of love, yeah, and a lot of self-love. But it takes time and it's not easy. Muhammad Ali was somebody I think was one of the greatest speakers of the 20th century. I loved how he used to talk to journalists, not just because of his boxing skills, but because his verbal confidence. But I also discovered that he wasn't great at writing, that spelling wasn't easy for him, that before he was Muhammad Ali, he was Cassius Clay. But he's a role model for dyslexic learners to use their verbal reasoning, but we didn't learn that at school. I wish more people did know that. I'm going to point to the picture next to Muhammad Ali. Can I ask who might want to guess what that is? And I'm pointing to it. It is the picture in between. Yep. Lakaya, thank you. Keisha, thank you. It is a lamp and a light bulb. Anyone want to guess who might have made that light bulb? Wow. Okay, you're really on it. That's great. Okay. Thomas Edison. It is. It's Thomas Edison's light bulb. It's the very first light bulb that actually worked. Thomas Edison made hundreds that didn't work. He was a diabetic deaf man who struggled to make company and friends. He didn't give up. In a world full of candles, where people had candles, it must have been quite abstract what he was doing. Do we even need it? I don't even think that Thomas Edison just gave us a light bulb. He changed economies. He changed the way the world works, the way it functions, when it functions. He changed the 20th century. I find it incredible that a deaf man who made that. I'm going to point to my last picture, which I want to guess some of you may know who she is, but I wonder if you want to have a guess on that. And again, you're welcome to come off mute or put her name into the chat as well. Lisa, thank you. Frida Kahlo. I'm going to maybe just use the time here. Can anyone guess why Frida Kahlo might be here in this list of differences? Can you guess? So Frida Kahlo was epileptic. And because of her epilepsy, and also because she was a woman, she was not really allowed to finish her medical degree. But she was she would have been a great doctor. And she was studying and trying to do that. She also later on had a terrible car accident. It left her semi-paralyzed. But through art and expression and the way she looked at the body, medicine, healing, she created some of the most amazing artwork in the world. And we will come to know her work. I actually wonder if you guys might be able to guess who her husband is. Anyone? And that's okay if you're not sure. Her husband is a very famous muralist, one of the most famous muralists in the world. And his name was Diego Rivera. But I kind of like it. I'm sharing that for a reason because sometimes I can show a picture of Diego Rivera and people won't know who he is, but they all know his wife. And at the time when they were married, the whole world knew who Diego Rivera was, but I don't think not many people knew who he was married to. And that is, of course, the great Frida Kahlo. So I'm showing you these really as just a snapshot to ask a question to you. That are these stories and these sharing, are they this amazing despite disabilities? Or are they amazing through them? Because of them? Because of the things they can feel and see? And when we look at the things that people can think and feel, then they get to change the world. And that's the debt we owe to that we find a way of recognizing it is not our job to make people more like us. It's more our job as practitioners, as teachers, as leaders, to go to where they live, to look at what is the stories that they would be telling us. And what happens, just like Alan Turing, what happens when we don't see it in time? All of you now are working with people that is a future Frida Kahlo or a future Muhammad Ali or an innovator like Steve Jobs or Thomas Edison. Some of those stories will be impacted by self-esteem. Some of those will be young people who really feel they don't belong. And your role isn't to help them mask better. Your role is to celebrate that they're here with you, and you do that already every day. And it's how we look at the role modeling of that around the world. So on the next slide, I'm really just raising a question, which is that the diversity of thought can change the world. I think that perhaps it really is the only thing that ever does. And this matters. But to do this well, we have to anticipate it. We have to anticipate that the diversity of thought will not come in the ways we traditionally understand it. We have to recognize that our job as leaders is to welcome those differences early, to know that we are better off in our society and our world if we can welcome those differences. And that we won't get to a healthy place in the world if people are hiding their differences just to cope or just to fit in. On the next slide, it's really about this question here, and I'm going to raise it with you, that you are not here to be psychic, nor should you be expected to be. But as leaders and as teachers, you can anticipate diversity, and you can anticipate that people will have good reasons, intersectional reasons to hide those differences. So we don't want to be reacting to individuals' needs, but we want to be anticipating that all individuals will have different needs. And for some, we'll look at disability and wish people could understand the barriers they face rather than the identity that it looks like they have. And when we understand barriers rather than just the medical model of a deficit or a disorder or a disability, then we can understand what we collectively can do in that space. How do we build change in that space? And why it matters so much that we anticipate these barriers and we welcome what it's teaching us, and we welcome the person seeking to overcome those barriers. Does that all make sense so far?
Loving it.
Thank you, thank you. So, Schontal, I would say that this is really the work of diversity and ability. It's also the work of the social model. Now, the medical model says something's wrong with this person, whereas the social model says these are the barriers people face. So, if I was to look at the next slide, I think I'm going to get into an exciting point as well. I have put in the chat as well, and I can redo it as well, so you can all find it quicker. I put in the chat a link to the website link to diversity and ability, and particularly the work that we did with Cole. And I'm going to do that again for you as well. So you can all click on that and see that with more. And there, I've just put it in the chat for you all. Now, this was some work that we did with some incredible colleagues with the Global Rainbow Foundation, and it was in Mauritius. Is anyone from Mauritius here on this chat? I'd be really excited if they are. And the work with Mauritius, working with Cole and the Cole Partners Global Rainbow Foundation. Jerusha, you're in. Okay, so I wonder if you're, Jerusha, I want to make sure I got this right. Are you aware, and no worries if you're not at all, of the Global Rainbow Foundation and the work they do? But there's a man called Dr. Pasarama. He was one of the founders of this. And here, these are the colleagues that we took on a course, and they are from the Global Rainbow Foundation, and they were all taught assistive technologies. I was one of the people that did it, along with my friend and colleague Robin, who's in the white shirt there. And we created two courses. One was on assistive technologies, what they do, and how they can help. It could be something that you speak to and it types what you say. It could be voice input software. It could be even software where you just hold up your phone and it'll read to you that there are 3 people here. They're standing here and there's a desk here. And there are so many things, that technologies and tools that are not available to people, not because they don't need it, but because they're also poor. So they're not aware of what assistive technologies help. We also created a second course, which was making assessments of needs, how to make an assessment that would showcase how do we make a meaningful assessment? So if I was doing an assessment on Robin, I would be looking at not just what disability he has, but how does he live? Is he poor? Is he middle class? What is the bus that he can access to get to college? How does it help? What does it feel like to be a person facing such barriers? All these things were part of the course that we taught. And we were very lucky to have a team like the Commonwealth for Learning supporting that work. And as I said, do have a look at that link because you'll see case studies from different countries that we did this in. We did this across 18 different states in Africa, Lesbos and Namibia as well. And I'm really proud of that work. It went on to Tonga and Sierra Leone, and it's a piece of work that I think has so much to look at in how we change the world because technology is just tools. And the important thing about the tools is making sure that people can access them. Oh, that's great as well. Thank you. Joseph, thank you. Yes, the Global Rainbow Foundation also collaborated with Chandra for the Jaipur Foot. Yeah, great. I left college, I was working with the foundation. Thank you for putting that there. That's amazing. We have that in common. So it was a great piece of work that we were able to do there. And what was amazing as well, that the team at the GRF, the Global Rainbow Foundation, were able to take the training and the teaching that we did there, and then they were able to write assessments and needs in Mauritius. They were employing lived experiences, disabled people themselves, to write those assessments. They could relate to things that other people would miss. They would ask questions that other people may miss. And the important thing of that lived experience is it informed a process that took away shame, that somebody was asking you questions to make sure that you've got the right technology, but they could relate to what you were going through. It won't be exactly the same, but it's close to seeing how you feel seen and how you feel understood when people are learning to make those assessments. It really matters. So on the next slide, I'm just going to show you, bring you up to speed on some things. And we're coming towards sort of the end of this, but I do want questions really and spaces for that. So I'll speed up a little bit. But you have here the UN SDG goals. I wonder how many people have come across the SDG goals. I'm guessing most of you. What I really love, these are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I really love something that's really important that runs all the way through them. That I really love that not one of them is disability. Now you may think, oh, well, that's not good. There should have been one goal about disabled people, or at least one goal with people with disabilities. But in truth, disabled experiences are running all the way through this. That there will not be a single goal here that is achievable without the experiences of marginalized people, people facing poverty, disablement, structural barriers, colonial legacies, or racism, that it is tied to all these things, misogyny. It truly matters. If I go to the next slide, I might just show you that in a bit more. And those of you who are in the global south, you will see this, that poverty is the most disabling thing on earth. It changes whether we make choices, if we get to access choices. It changes whether we go to school or work early when we're children. And it changes whether we have self-esteem to say we matter. When all too often when we're dealing with poverty, it's very hard to feel you matter when you're dealing with just survival. So I would argue that poverty is the most disabling thing on earth. It's more profound than wheelchairs and ramps. And then we have hunger, goal number 2. Disabled people eat last because of poverty. Then you have goal number 3, good health and well-being. Well, how can we achieve good health and well-being if so many people are missing and not being able to choose things? Then we have goal 4, education. This is where you come into it, but you come into all 6 of these. But quality education is really your great work. It's what Code does amazingly. And then you have gender equality and reduced inequalities. They cannot be normalized without the experiences of marginalized people teaching you, showing you. It informs your process. It radically makes these things achievable. but only if they are integrated all the way through them, rather than sidelined. That's intersectionality, recognizing that we can be integrated, providing our different barriers that we face and the different lives we have can be seen. On the next slide, and we're going to share these slides with you, but on the next slide, this is a little bit of the work that I've described with Global Rainbow Foundation. So in 2019, we researched and created a course. Mauritius made higher education free for everybody in 2016. I found that amazing. It included everybody. But I wondered what program or plan did they have for disabled learners in education? And they didn't really have one, other than they were hoping that more disabled learners would come forward to get their support needs. This is when I wrote to them, to the government there, to try to make sure that we could look at assistive technologies and see how assistive technologies could be rolled out for free using open source software. And it was the team at Global Rainbow Foundation that got back to me, and then they put me in touch with Cole, and Cole sponsored the work. And it was incredible work to see, and its legacy is going on now, even now, where the team at Mauritius were teaching the team in Tonga with us in the UK, and the team in Tonga were going on to teach others. So this is really the map of it. This work has now gone on to do work in Kenya, and it is really looking at the idea of tools. As I said, Tonga, Mauritius, Seychelles, Namibia, Lesbos, Botswana. These are just some of the countries we went to. One of the most amazing assistive technology tools in the world. And without it, I would be really disabled if I cannot get home, or I cannot do my work, or I cannot feel safe. It's a tool that no one really asks me if I'm disabled or not when they see it. But I promise you, it's the most important assistive technology in the world. It's this. And it's so good that we no longer even think about it as a tool. And we don't look at someone who wears glasses and say, are you disabled? Can you work here? Do you need help? We have normalized it so well, we no longer think about it. But I promise you, like most of you who wear glasses, if someone took your glasses away, you will find yourself in a disabling situation. It doesn't mean you have a disability all the time, but you are in a disabling situation. And that's the mentality to get to, is to recognize that disability is not an identity. It's a situation. And how do we address the situation? It's a bit like refugees, and I try to explain that to people in the UK. It's not an identity unless you say so, but it's a situation. So how do we address the situation when people are seeking refuge? Is that really important to get that language right? But I really want to give space for you to think about that. Tony, if we move on to the next slide, and then we're going to move forward to, I want to give some space for questions and answers if there are any. But this is it, that DNA has supported probably about 28,000 individuals with assistive technology training. But it was Cole and their commitment to the UN CRPD Accords, that the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that this was really important, that assistive technology and needs assessment makes such a real difference, especially when it can tackle the disability employment gap, especially when globally people can see tools, even free ones, being utilized and given and taught by other lived experiences. This is the work that we did with Cole, and I'm deeply proud of it. And I think that it will go on to do more great things as we move forward. So the next slide is just giving you a sense of the nations, really. And again, you can look at the case studies. If there's time, I'll put the actual case study as well as that link in, but you've got the link to it on our website. And do have a look at it. Do tell us what you think of this after, if you have a chance to interact. I'll put my email address on it, or Chandi, if she might do that as well. And just tell us what you think of today. But there were, in the work that we did in Cole, there's 146 needs assessors now. It was across 7 nations, and 39 different NGOs were involved in this on the ground across the world. And there we have 146 people making assessments of need and teaching assistive technologies that they themselves are using. It's an incredible legacy of how far this can go. So on the next slide is just a quote really from a lady that was in Tonga, and I'll read it to you. Before the course, I assumed it would equip me with the skills I might need to work with disabled children and adults. What I found is that I discovered technologies that are helpful for me too, that they made my work a lot easier, and without them, work and consequently life is more challenging. This is really important that we recognize if I reach out to the most marginalized person in a room, I may be reaching out to more people in the room. I may even discover that the most marginalized person in the room wasn't the person I thought it was. It was somebody who was hiding their difference. And they came up and said, I feel safe. I understand that you mean the best for me, and you made this safe for me to tell you a story. It really matters if we understand it, that it's not just about the name of a disability, but the life of the person and the barriers that that person faces and what it is that we are missing when that person is facing barriers that cannot tell their story or teach us what our world looks like. So on the last slide is really here for you, and I'm going to hand back to Schontal as well. But here's a link there's a link here. And if you use your phones, you can QR code that, just click on that, and you will have a link to lots of free assistive technologies and tools. We make them free for people because, as I said, the most disabling thing on earth, I think, isn't the name of a disability or a wheelchair user, but poverty. So it's really important how we address that collectively and the tools that might make that difference. So do click on that if you can. I'll give you all a minute just to do that. And I will use this space to invite questions and hand back to Schontal if you can. And yeah, and click on here as well. You may have questions that you want to ask publicly and questions you may want to ask after. You may have questions that you want to share just with Schontal. But either way, this is your space, you know, and this may be the first time you've come across this work. I'm not sure, but if it is, I really hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Atif. I have totally enjoyed it and learned quite a bit. And I do have comments and questions, but I want to open up the floor first and foremost to the other attendees to engage. I see that Marcel's hand was up. Dr. Hudson, go right ahead. You can unmute and you can ask your question.
Well, actually, can you hear me, Shontal?
Loud and clear, yes.
Right. I wanted to support the presenter when he made mention of the fact that you would not have seen in the development of the Millennium Goals, you would not have seen clearly the concept of disability, but the idea of inclusivity, you would see the word inclusivity, and inclusivity is kind of cross-cutting. It goes across all of the goals, and I think the presenter did a good job. I think he did a good job at that because when you look at education, you see inclusivity. When you look at the issue of how people are treated, how they're dealt with, and so on, you see inclusivity. When you look at gender equality, you see inclusivity. And so it's not to isolate persons, and the idea that poverty may be one of the greatest disability because where there is lack, there is no money to do so many things. We could see how people could be destabilized. So I wanted to make mention of that. I'm sorry I didn't take my hands down. So my hand down. That was an old hand you were looking at, and not a new hand.
That's fine. But Atif?
Yeah, I'm not sure I could follow the question. Would you give me the question, Schontal?
Right. I think he was talking about the business of inclusivity and how, it goes across all boundaries. Marcel, go ahead.
Yes, you're correct, Chantal. He said that in his presentation he noted that you may not have seen a particular goal for people with disabilities. So I was making the point that while you may not have seen a particular goal, there's a reason for that because there are so many other things that contribute to disability. It's not just a physical context alone. It has to do with finance, has to do with education and so on. So I was really supporting you, as if in what you were saying. It's not a question, it was more a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Marcel. Thank you. I agree. And yeah, what we're talking about is the social model, right? That there are a myriad of barriers that a person faces. But all too often we get caught in a medical model and we say, what disabilities do you got?
Yeah.
What's wrong with sometimes I like saying, what's wrong with you? Do you know? And then I can sort of say, particularly when it comes to dyslexia, what's wrong with you? What's, autism, what's wrong with you? You know?
Yeah. Great. Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
Marcel.
Anyone else? Just go ahead and raise your hand and we will give you access to comment or ask a question. Lisa?
Hello. Thank you very much, Atif. That was excellent. I really enjoyed it. I had so many questions, I don't even know where to start because you highlighted areas, as you talked about earlier, that idea of masking. One
Yeah.
of the questions I want to start off asking, and then we can come back. You talked about the social and the medical, and I understand the medical clinical part of it is the part that says, what is wrong with you versus the social part that is looking closely at the barriers.
Yeah.
However, I wanted to know, given the clinical researches that are out there where disability is concerned, and they're the field that is going to be the one to come up with I suppose, the medical prescription, so to speak. Is there any way the two can coexist? Because it sounds like they're both antagonistic.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love this question. Lisa, thank you. Yeah. So can the medical model and the social model coexist? I actually think they have to coexist. I think that there is a place for both. So it's a question of balance. So if I give an analogy, I might give one, is if you have say acquired brain injury, do you need to have a brain injury to be a neurosurgeon? No. It's probably helpful if you don't. Right? But at the same time, do you need to be a neurosurgeon who can really understand what's the environment telling us that that surgery worked? What is the environmental factors that tells us how this surgery, if we're going to do it, needs to be applied? And in that sense, the social model of this person's life or the social reality of this person's life informs the process that gives us a diagnosis. So they are compatible, but often because of social outrage, and I think, Lisa, this is important bit, because there are years of oppression, years of exclusion, that there is understandably a movement saying, please see us as a whole person. Please see the way we live as a reality, and please join us in solidarity in addressing the barriers we face. So often in that sense, there's almost if I may say, a ricochet to push the social model strongly, because all too often the medical model has been the only story in town. So I actually think they can complement, and I would like to see a biosocial model that looks at the biology of some of the realities, but still governs its understanding through a social impact.
Yeah.
Thank you, Atif.
Yeah, Atif, there's some really great comments in the chat. I want to read Esther's comment. Esther says the take-home message is that disability is more of a situation, meaning everyone can be in a disabling situation at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every one of us. Yeah, this is beautiful that you took that as well. Hopefully, if we're lucky, all of us will be. I hope we're all lucky enough to get elderly. And when we're elderly, we'll realize, okay, the stairs that I used to climb are not easy for me today. My father is a really strong man, but he's 86. Now he has a stair lift. And I think, okay, If you tell him he's disabled, he will say, "No, I'm not." And it's okay, but you need a chairlift to go up the stairs. So it is attitudinal, right?
Yeah.
You know?
I think as educators, Atif, many of us begin from a space of the medical model because that's what we have been socialized,
Yeah,
oriented to accepting and seeing from,
yeah,
younger coming up. And then in the space now as educators, we perpetuate that medical model only. And, so we teach with that in mind. But what your talk is doing for us is to opening up our eyes to say that it's not that you stay there, but you move now towards a social model of disability to
yeah,
see what is your role and responsibility as an educator. Because for me, I'm now thinking that, in my classrooms, disability cannot be what I'm looking for to decide how to teach differently to reach all my students. But I
yeah.
have to move from a place of, like, I don't know. Disability is not necessarily what I see in my students. I might not see their disabilities. It might not with my naked eyes, but it doesn't mean that they don't have. So I have to make my classroom not only inclusive, but enabling so that all my students can learn. And then I think about now beyond the face-to-face classroom, the online classroom, how do I make sure that my courses incorporate assistive technologies so that all my students can be enabled and that I don't have so many disabling situations in my online classroom. So don't know if you want to comment on my comment. It's not so much a question, but just through reflection, listening to what you have been sharing and how that will
No,
empower me as an
I think,
educator.
yeah, I think, Chantal, I think you got it. You got it. And for all of you, like, and to be forgiving to yourselves, right? Because the medical model is really not the only show in town, but it feels like it, and it's taught to you like it, right? Remember, I said in the beginning, we're going to do more unlearning than learning, maybe, right? We're going to shake off. And I'm not anti the medical model, I'm just anti its power. So if I was to stop on this context of just a moment, is you're absolutely right. So it's recognizing that we're not psychic, nor should we expect ourselves to be. We have to be kind as teachers, as practitioners to ourselves. But we can anticipate that people might not tell me things because they're hiding. We can anticipate they may not know themselves, but they've normalized it. I did not know I was dyslexic till I was 27. Yeah, I thought I just wasn't bright. I've done all these things in the world, but I truly thought I don't spell so well and I'm not good at writing. Therefore, I am not bright. And this lives and manifests in the world. And I've changed things in lives and worlds all over. I get that. But I learned much later on. So was it helpful for me to get a label? Yes, it was. It was deeply liberating. But did the label know how to really address how I lived? No. And I was just very lucky that somebody looked at me and thought, wow, this guy's a genius. Why does he struggle to write like this? you know and he was kind enough to come into my life and
Mhm.
and try to support me. But he
Yeah.
asked me, I said, I don't know, I think I'm just not really good at writing. So it changed the world. Does this make sense? So you can anticipate it. And I want to use that analogy, I'm going to give it again. Is that a refugee, for example, we think of it as an identity, but honestly it's not, right? It's a situation.
Yeah. Thanks. And I had a question about AI as well, and I see that Simon has posted a question there for you. Simon is asking, what is your take on the role of AI in differentiated instruction, personalized learning, and inclusive education in addressing disability? So,
Great question. Simon, thank you for it. I have done some work on this, and I don't know, I'm putting Chandy on the spot, who's wonderfully being amazing all the way back, but I don't know if we can find it or we can email it to you separately. But I've done some work on this very conversation about AI and ethics in the context of disabled realities. And I will slow down to say, I think that AI has a space incredibly to democratize participation, providing we can get online than the stories of people who struggle to tell their stories when they're voice inputting something and it's typing it, or they're asking AI, learn how I talk, learn how I create the way I write this. Then it can get things written work done very quickly. And it's an assistive technology, it's a tool. But like all tools, we have to use it with caution.
Yeah.
And we have to be very careful about this particular one because this particular one is moving at a speed faster than we can culturally understand it. It's moving faster than our fears can comprehend it. And this, I think, makes this particular thing important to say, well, can it change the disability employment gap? I think it can. Will it change the disability employment gap? Well, I think that depends on the attitudes of people and how we want to use it.
Great. Thank you. So Lisa, we'll turn the last comment or question over to you as we wrap up.
Thanks, Chantal. Just two quick questions because I'm really enjoying this discussion, Atif. So one of the question is looking at intersectionality and identity. So we're saying that disability is not an identity, but it's a situation. But within an intersectionality frame, it is an identity, but can it be an identity in a positive way where one embraces it, not in the negative perception that we have been taught? So that's one of my questions. Just a very quick question.
Yeah, no, Lisa, it's a great question. And I think this question deserves more time, and I'm going to do it justice if I can. I'm on the board for a charity called Disability Rights UK. And all over the world, we're part of 3rd of December, International Day of Disabled Person. And it's a day of pride. It's to say, see my identity, to see. So and in this context, people are struggling to say, I'm not a situation, I am a reality that's invisible often. Yeah, so this is really what you're touching at, Lisa. And I think that this is really the challenge we have, is that if, and I will be courageous as I say this, that just like race is a construct, right? It doesn't exist, but racism does. Okay. Disability is a construct, but disablement is not. Disabling situations or disablement happening to people is not a construct, it's real. Ableism is not a construct, it's real. But the idea of who is a disabled person and who isn't is an invented, because people have always come with barriers, people have always come with differences. But emotionally, and I think this is the heart of the question, and I would really, Lisa, challenge me back on this. Emotionally, just as we want to have Black pride, or or people of color pride, then or indigenous people's pride, then emotionally, because of historic oppression, we want to have disability pride, and that is the powerful crossroads that we find ourselves in. Would that make sense?
Yes, definitely, no challenge.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I like thinking of these things in terms of collective liberation. And in that space, when we recognize that a person's experiences are teaching us what our world is, and we're grateful to that, then we are also being liberated by that experience. So we have this collective liberation. But if this collective liberation is truly healing, then a generation coming, maybe even a global one, not in my lifetime, but just looks at differences the way I look at people with glasses. But once upon a time, this meant I was disabled. If I can't buy it, I'm very disabled. And now we no longer think about it.
Yeah, agreed. There's a comment, Atif, from Philippa, and I want to share it. Philippa says, the problem we have in both primary and secondary schools is that we speak of inclusion and encourage it without enabling resources and even appropriate environment. Poverty is a culprit, and lack of appropriate assessment, and where needs are identified, assistive devices remain a major threat to any form of inclusion. Atif's presentation is the answer to this. I enjoyed and learned from this. Hope and going to contribute to change in the lives of people with disability. So
Wow.
comments?
No, other than I'm very grateful, Philippa. This is healing for me just to read that. I think, it's great to be able to talk about poverty as a situation rather than an absolute. It's great to look at that, and yeah, no, I just, no comments other than just I'm grateful to it. And I think that, I'm glad you shared it.
Okay, thanks. All right, so we are at the end of our hour and a little over, and just want to say thank you, Atif, for an engaging, informative, liberating session. The persons who are here, we do not leave, how we came in. We have left with so much. And for me, my takeaway is that it's a new language.
Yeah.
It's a new outlook and perception, meaning moving from medical more so towards social, shift the dial a bit. And our roles as teachers, as educators, we have to take that seriously within the context of, the debt that we owe to difference. When you put up that slide with all those persons who have had and lived with disabilities, but yet they didn't allow that to define them or to identify them. We knew them for other things, not for their disabling or disability. And they didn't allow their situations to remain a disabling challenge, to move towards greatness. So I think our role as educators is to see how within our classrooms we can move our students towards, greatness, irrespective of ability or disability. Yeah,
Yeah.
because all of us have that within us, and we have to dig deep for it for our students. In the online classrooms, you provided a link for us to check out some assistive
Yeah.
technologies that we can integrate, and I want to encourage persons to follow that link and to see where they can incorporate more of those technologies within their classrooms. All right, so those are my parting words. I will ask Lisa, and then we wrap up with your parting words, Atif. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Atif. It was an amazing presentation. And I especially very echoing similar to what Chantel said. I really liked the way you brought attention to the social, because I think even governments, when they are making policies around disability, they tend to focus a lot on the medical. So this is what the hospitals and this is what the clinics offer. They forget the social, and as a result of that, we see it especially in the global south, where you go to a simple a mall and there's not a ramp, or in the classroom where there's little resources that will address issues, especially the one that are masked, like dyslexia, as you said. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you everybody for having me. I think it's amazing to have done this work with Cole and to see the changes that I still get here from some of the students as well, that did the Moodle. And I think we have some great work that normalizes these kind of conversations, you know? And I think, and I love personally, I would say this, I'm from Bangladesh. When I see Global South leading the way, this is where the real light is, So
Great. Okay, thanks, Atif. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Jandy. Thank you so very much, participants, attendees on this webinar. We are definitely going to send each and every one of you the email you the presentation that Atif did, as well as the links that are important. I saw that some people wanted your email address, Atif. I hope that's okay to share
yeah,
as well.
that's fine.
All right, great. So we will definitely be in touch with you. And just in return, we ask you to complete a short survey, which we will send the link to you. Thanks again for supporting VUSSC Voices. This is our third installment of VUSSC Voices. We have another one in 2 months' time, and we look forward to your engagement. This has been wonderful. Thank you so very much, Atif, for your presentation on the debt we owe to difference. We are going to be paying off that debt as educators in our classrooms every day. Right. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you, Chantel. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much as well. Bye bye, everyone. Have a great rest of day, whatever time it is in your country. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Atif.
Bye, Lisa. Lovely to meet you. Thank you for your questions. So great.